We have Tom Kilgore in the audience for the invocation. Please rise for the invocation. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please pray with me. Yes. Heavenly Father, we are thankful. Thankful for the country that we live in. Thank you for the county and city that we live in. Thank you, Father, for the leaders that we have and those that serve us so ably. God, I ask you tonight to be with those who are ill in our city and those who are homeless, especially those who are hungry. And God, please help those who can't have jobs to find jobs, Lord, so that they can support their families and their loved ones. God, I ask you to bless these leaders tonight as they make decisions that benefit our city. Give them wisdom. Give us wisdom as citizens to know how we can participate in the livelihood and the strength of our own city. And God, I ask you lastly to bless the military in harm's way this evening, wherever they might be. Bless their families here in the United States, God, and bring them back home to us safely. For these freedoms that we all enjoy, we say thank you, God. In your name we pray. Amen.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands.
Call the roll, please.
Mayor Greer.
Here.
Council members Ekstrom.
Here.
Ketchmar.
Here.
Bates.
Here.
Weed.
Here.
Sharaki.
Here.
Frida. Here. Councilmember Brown is excused. We have a quorum.
All right, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the October 19th regular city council meeting and the October 21st Public Works Committee meeting. Are there any corrections? May I have a motion, please? Councilman Bates.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I make a recommendation. We approve the October 19th, 2015 regular city council meeting and the October 21st, 2015 Public Works Committee meeting.
Second from Councilwoman Frida. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Bates.
Aye.
Councilmember Frida. Aye. Councilmember Sharaki.
Aye.
Councilmember Weed.
Aye.
Councilmember Ketchmar.
Aye.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Are there any council member announcements? Councilman Bates.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we have a general government meeting scheduled for Wednesday, the 4th at 4 p.m. here.
Any others? I have two announcements. One, we received from the Colorado Mission of Mercy, we received recognition for our contribution to the Colorado Mission of Mercy in Canyon City, August 13th through August 16th. And they thank us for being COMOM supporters. So we got a certificate of appreciation from them. Also, it's my pleasure to appoint Dennis Weed to the County Planning Commission. Did you know that was coming?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'm already
You
there
looked
and
at
I
me.
enjoy it.
All right. So that's all for that. Next is the adoption of the agenda and the consent agenda. Doug, will you review the consent agenda for us, please?
Yes, first item on the consent agenda is to declare various items of equipment as surplus property. He said he has a number of pieces of equipment that will be disposed of according to the city's purchasing policy. We discussed this with the Public Works Committee at the October 21st meeting, and it was recommended at that time. These would go up in an auction. Be no cost to the city, and of course, we'd reserve the right to reject any bids if we did not feel that if it was appropriate. Next item is to authorize the mayor's signature on a water service contract. We reviewed this at the October 21st Public Works Committee. This water service agreement is for 1419 Chestnut Street. This property owner would have no further requirements for system improvements. Next item, authorize the city administrator's signature on an engagement letter with Swanhorst and Company of Greenwood Village in the amount of $20,000. We reviewed this at the October 21st Public Works Committee, and this is the service contract for our auditor who would conduct the 2015 audit. Next item is to ratify a city administrator's signature on an agreement. This is a professional service agreement with Stantec, not to exceed $38,997.75. We reviewed this at the Public Works Committee on October 21st, and it was recommended at that time Stantec would be doing the engineering design services for the 4th Street Viaduct. And as the council members know, we are receiving a grant CDOT grant for the rehabilitation of this structure. The funds for the engineer services are included in the 2015 budget. Next item is to extend bid number 31 of 2012. This is for vegetation channel management to B&G Construction of Penrose. And the amount, this would be an additional amount of $136,000. This would be for a total amount not to exceed $236,000. We reviewed this at the October 21st Public Works Committee, and this is an annual contract that the city has with now B&G to manage and maintain our stormwater facilities throughout our community. It includes mowing, weed control, tree cutting, and so on, general maintenance of our ditches and drainage channels and detention ponds throughout the community. $83,400 of this would be reimbursed by FEMA. This would be a grant coming from FEMA for this purpose. $52,500 would be expended from the water fund, and then the remainder of that amount would come from the stormwater fund. Next item is to ratify the city administrator's signature on a JAG, or Justice Assistance Grant, that was received by the police department. We reviewed this and discussed it at the October 21st Public Works Committee, and this is grant funding in the amount of $16,934, which will be expended for mobile forensic equipment for the police department. And there are no city funds that will be used for this equipment. Next item is the community agency funding authorization for 2016, the distribution of those funds. We had a couple city council members, Councilmember Frieda and Councilmember Bates, participated in this discussion with Judge Larry Allen, myself, and Harry Patel. We had 24 applications from the local community agencies that were requesting funding assistance. The total grant request, the amount that all these agencies are requesting, amounted to $107,000, but unfortunately we only had $60,000, as you may recall, budgeted for next year. So obviously there's a big need in the community. The committee members considered all the applications. We heard presentations from everyone. The committee members decided that we really should focus on the need for food, youth activities, literacy, domestic violence assistance in our community, and so the funds were allocated primarily to the agencies serving those needs. So there's a list provided, and if you would agree with this, that $60,000 would be distributed as provided on the list, and if agreed, we'll be notifying them shortly by mail. Next item on the agenda is the authorizing a city administrator's signature on a license agreement with Sol Vista. Council members may recall we reviewed this. Actually, we talked about it several times, but last time at the September 9th General Government Committee, this would give a license agreement to Sol Vista to utilize city-owned property, which is kind of southwest of the police department or right behind the Sol Vista facility, and it would allow them to provide overflow parking on this property. Next item is bid 3715. This is for the Parks Department to Bobcat of the Rockies of Pueblo West, and the amount of $24,833. We reviewed this at the October 21st Public Works Committee. It was recommended at that time. This is for the purchase of a new mini excavator that the city will be using for the future for trail construction and maintenance throughout the area. It would be something that could be utilized by other agencies as well for trail construction. We had one bid that were from the two that were solicited. The funds for this are included in the 2015 budget. And then last of all, our bills for the last 2-week payable period.
Are there any additions or corrections? May I have a motion, please? Councilman Weed?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, I make the motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda as presented.
Second from Councilwoman Frieda. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Weed?
Aye.
Councilmember Frieda? Aye. Councilmember Ekstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Ketchmark?
Aye.
Councilmember Bates?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharaki?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
All right, next is the administrator's report.
Just a few items for tonight. First item, Really more maybe for the public that may not be aware, but Skyline Drive had been closed here periodically over the past couple weeks. And the Streets Department has been up repairing the road, repaving the road. They have nice shoulders on each side of the road, so it's now a good walking route for people. I've been up there now several times since that, and a number of people are up walking up in that area, so it's good to see that. For people that may not be aware, we have about 6 miles of hiking and biking trails now throughout the Hogback area, so a lot of nice recreational opportunities exist up in that area. The Parks Department is completing the trailhead parking lots that have been provided. There are interpretive signs that have now been provided along some of the trails, so some really good recreational opportunities for people. I've been up there several times, and for the guys, I've noticed that the ladies are really using this. Not so much for the guys, so we're kind of falling behind, and hopefully all of us will get up there and start using the trails. So, the Royal Gorge Park restrooms, another piece of information. The Parks Department has completed improvements of the restroom in the picnic area, which is just to the east of the Visitor Center. You may recall that area was pretty well destroyed in the fire. We have new landscaping, new parking. Picnic shelters have been upgraded and redone. Parking, as I mentioned, is provided. There's a trail. The Rim Trail is right across the street, so it's a nice trailhead for people that want to get out and walk the Rim Trail at the park. And also for people that, just so that they are aware, the Parks Department will be expanding that Rim Trail here over the course of the winter and into next spring. So it should be a nice walk up there for people to get up and take advantage of shortly. 9th and Main intersection, as you probably know, the contractor's been working in that area. The 9th Street now is open, north and south, so that finally is open. You'll notice that there are still gravel patches in the intersection, and we expect that the contractor will probably repave the intersection at the same time they pave some of the water service lines that were cut across Main Street. So it may be a couple weeks or so out before that's actually done, but hopefully they'll get to that as soon as they can. But for now, the traffic is moving. And for people that have an interest over at the library is now connected to fiber. So that's a good thing. We are offering now the public a much faster, more reliable access to the internet over at the library, and we're starting to see people take advantage of that. Students are coming in, doing their homework and so on, so hopefully more people will continue to take advantage of that service. At the dinosaur exhibit at the museum, or the city's museum, the museum workers and the BLM are working to revamp that entire dinosaur exhibit. So it's going to be a nice exhibit coming here before too long. That exhibit will probably be closed in January, February. They'll be targeting a spring opening of that dinosaur gallery. They'll be highlighting the geologic areas, the discoveries that have been made during those times, discoveries that have been made here locally, the people that have been making those discoveries locally. So a lot of good information will be there at the library for people that are interested in the local history. The Downtown Development Authority, a group of citizens and business people, have been moving this Downtown Development Authority forward. They met on October the 23rd. They are now investigating ways to help existing retailers identify sort of new market opportunities and expansion possibilities for existing businesses, and how they can possibly attract new businesses into the area and into the downtown. So as we've talked about many times here with the City Council, it's not just about improving the street in the downtown and hoping that's going to solve all the problems of the downtown, but there are many pieces to the puzzle as been described. This Downtown Development Authority and the group of people that's coming together to move this forward is an important part of that. And we expect that this group will be having another meeting in later in November, and probably making some recommendations to the City Council and to our attorney in Denver that's working on this in terms of organization structure, some steps for going forward, and so on. So things are moving forward with respect to the downtown. Just a reminder for the City Council, the Board and Commission Recognition Dinner will be held on December the 3rd, which is a Thursday, the first Thursday of December. It will be at 5:30 here at City Hall. So hopefully you'll all be able to come and enjoy that evening. The next item, just kind of a piece of information. We have an election going on tomorrow, and one of the things that's on the ballot question is the 1% sales tax rate increase here in the city that would go for streets. And I don't know if the council members are aware, but there are 16 of these election questions, basically like what we have going on here, going on in cities and towns throughout the state of Colorado. So this issue of sales tax increases for street-related, transportation-related improvements is a big issue out there that many communities are facing, not just here in Canyon City. Lastly, just for council information, on November the 16th, which is the two regular meetings down the line, we will have a city council orientation workshop for city council members. It would start at 1 o'clock. We'll be going through everything from meeting agendas and how to hold meetings and the whole gamut, everything that the city does and so on. So hopefully it'll be a good orientation for council members, and we'll be looking forward to providing that workshop for the council at that time.
What was the date again, Doug?
That would be November the 16th at 1 p.m. here at City Hall. And that's it for tonight.
Thank you, Doug. Next is item number 6, ordinance number 12, Series 2015, first reading for additional appropriations in the 2015 budget. I need 3 to introduce. Councilman Weed, Councilman Bates, Councilwoman Frida. Clerk, read by title, please.
This is a bill for ordinance number 12, series of 2015, and ordinance appropriating additional sums of money to defray expenses in excess of amounts budgeted for the city of Canyon City, Colorado for the 2015 budget year.
May I have a report from, is it you, Doug?
Well, Harry unfortunately is not here, so you're stuck with me. A couple things. Typically, this is something that we do every year about this time, that the city council considers adjustments and appropriations. This is one where we have a couple of items to make adjustments to, one of which is to the city's self-insurance fund. We have had cost of $225,000 that are over and above our previously estimated budget costs for medical claims. And so this would allow us to satisfy the medical claims that have been incurred during the calendar year within our self-insurance fund. It really has no effect on the general fund whatsoever. This is strictly an item within the self-insurance fund. We also had a couple of items there amounting to $12,500 for PPO fees and long-term disability premiums that we also need to cover, that the fees that were incurred during the year. We also had a couple of other items that you'll notice. In the water fund, we actually received a FEMA grant in the amount of $46,589. We did not account for that grant at the beginning of the year. So since we've received it, we are now accounting for that in this appropriation. And then lastly, very similar item in the stormwater fund, we had a FEMA grant for some flood projects in the amount of $64,600, and now again we did not account for that at the beginning of the year. We received that grant later on in the year, so we're accounting for it in the appropriation here. So,
Any questions from council? May I have a motion, please? Councilman Weed?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of council, I move we approve ordinance number 12, series of 2015 on first reading.
Second.
Second from Councilwoman Frida. Any discussion on the motion? Roll, please.
Councilmember Weed?
Aye.
Councilmember Frida? Councilmember Ketchmar?
Aye.
Councilmember Bates?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharaki?
Aye.
Councilmember Ekstrom?
Aye.
Approved by unanimous vote.
Next is item number 7, ordinance number 13, series 2015, first reading, regulating the cultivation, sale, and use of marijuana and marijuana products by unlicensed persons. I need 3 to introduce. Councilman Bates, Councilman Ekstrom, Councilman Weed. Clerk, read by title, please.
This is a bill for ordinance number 13, series of 2015, a land use ordinance providing for local regulation with respect to the cultivation, sale, and use of marijuana and marijuana products by unlicensed persons within the city of Canyon City.
We have a report from the city attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, the nature of the problem. There are a number of backyard cultivation areas where marijuana plants have been grown this year and in prior years, usually by patients or caregivers who appear to have authority to grow in excess of 6 marijuana plants. The solution that is suggested through this ordinance is that the city's police powers be used to limit a number of things related to these larger grows of marijuana plants. First, there would be a limitation as to places where marijuana may be grown. That would be secure areas within residences, within garages, or within accessory structures associated with the property. There is an exception to built in now at the request of council to the secure area definition, which would allow patients to grow out of doors up to 6 plants per patient or up to 12 plants per household if there are multiple patients in the household. That would be in an enclosed backyard area. It would have a setback of at least 20 feet from the nearest residential dwelling place. It would be the limitation as to numbers of plants that I just mentioned, and it would involve a limited grow area of 32 square feet, which is the grow area applied to all indoor and outdoor grows, with the exception of accessory structures where 50 feet would be available for marijuana grows. An accessory structure would have 4 walls, 4 secure walls, and a roof. And in that area, greater than 32 feet up to 50 feet could be used to cultivate plants if the ordinance is adopted as presented. With the exception of that exception, there's a general limitation on the number of marijuana plants that may be cultivated with respect to any residence, and that number is 12. Once again, 6 per person, or 12 for an entire household if multiple people within the household are entitled to grow marijuana. The 32 square foot growing area applies to indoor and outdoor, as I previously mentioned, with the exception of accessory buildings which have the 50 foot grow space authorized. All secure areas must be constructed under this ordinance in accordance with applicable building codes, fire codes, plumbing codes, and electrical codes. This is intended to both protect those who grow within their premises and first responders such as firemen, who often enter these places in total darkness, and if there aren't adequate protections of the types provided by codes, sometimes those first responders have a very difficult time doing their job, and are sometimes injured or killed. So that's the purpose behind that particular suggested regulation. I did a couple of things with council's recommendations. One was, as I previously mentioned, to enlarge the definition of secure area, which starts at the bottom of page 2 and continues over to page 3 of the proposed ordinance. I think I've said enough about that, but if I haven't, please ask questions. The next thing I did, again, pursuant to the instructions of the full council at its committee meeting, was to incorporate into the ordinance a penalties section. The penalty for a violation of any of the prohibitions contained in this ordinance, if adopted, would be a mandatory minimum of $500, with possibility of the fine going to the full limit as provided in section 1.28.010 of our municipal code. There was a question at the committee meeting, what is the maximum fine under that code provision? It is $2,650 before the last adjustment, which would have been a matter of pennies. So that's the appropriate number for the maximum fine. The penalty section also recommends to the court to take a look at grows that exceed the numbers of permitted plants and grows that exceed the area within which plant growing is permitted in calculating what might be an appropriate fine, with the larger grows being potentially subject to greater fines. Finally, and this wasn't a specific directive from council to staff, but it was mentioned during the committee meeting and seemed to make great good sense. So on page 5 at paragraph E, I basically gave you back in a little bit of a different form the same information that was there before, but included, in addition to what you had seen before, a 20-foot setback with respect to neighboring properties. Otherwise, it's basically what you looked at the two committee meetings. I'll stop at that point and field any questions you might have.
Are there any questions from council? Look like you have a question. You have a question, Councilman Chiraki?
I have a lot of questions. I kind of went through, and a 4x8 area seems a little insufficient for growing anything at all. I think that, I guess when you talk about the firefighters, I can see health and safety, but it says, he left welfare out of the beginning part in the whereas for the bill. I don't know if it matters. It says safety and health. I thought welfare would be good because it seems to speak the neighbor's happiness seems to be the big thing.
It is one of the things, yes.
My big thing. And then also, what if there is in an industrial zone where it's not affecting anyone, a legitimate caregiver with legitimate patients that are unable to grow their own marijuana? Is there any type of, I think there should be an approved variance or something like that. You know, it could come up to city council that we could approve it if there is any. I understand we're trying to get the residential 90 plant grow operations out of there, but if there is a legitimate caregiver with legitimate patients, they should have the opportunity to do something maybe in an industrial zone or a place less residential. And it seems to wipe it out completely.
It does wipe it out completely. I can tell you both the legislature and the State Board of Health have taken through regulations and through legislation action that is intended to severely curtail grows done by caretakers and grows done by people who purporting to be caretakers who might be something else. So the general rule is going to become that no caretaker can have more than 5 patients or grow more than 6 plants for the whole array of patients. So that number is going to be down to a more manageable number under state regulation. If you were to put it into our law, and I suggest it might be kind of premature to do that, you might be jumping the gun in an area where the state is fairly effectively regulating. If we should see a need, I mean a real need, we could always take a look at amending the ordinance. But right now the need seems to be to protect neighbors and neighborhoods from adverse effects that they are encountering and have encountered with respect to large plant large plant marijuana grows in backyards primarily, and then the possibility that there might be black market activities connected to some of these larger grows. There certainly, in talking with our police department, there certainly are situations that raise inferences that there are black market connections, or at least opportunities for those things, and that our police and your city attorney thinks is not a good thing, and so that's how and why it was presented in the way it was. In terms of the growing area, the 32 square foot number was arrived at by other municipalities in the state of Colorado around the time Amendment 12 or Amendment 64 had passed, and those other jurisdictions were dealing with home grows a little earlier than we were. There are prefabricated grow containers that Home Depot and some of the other building supply people can sell just off the shelf, and that's partly how the 32 square feet was picked. Is it would be convenient and less expensive to pick up these, let me call them modules, and just set them down in your garage or your house and have your secure locked area. And secure means 4 walls, a ceiling, and a lockable or locked door.
Also, the on K and M, I think that they're kind of redundant. I think they could be put together maybe. It is unlawful for any person to store used chemicals used for marijuana cultivation, and then it says it is unlawful for any marijuana cultivation or process activity in matters that involves the use of storage of chemicals, products, waste products, hazardous or safety nearby. I think that could be one thing.
It perhaps could be. I mean, L is really the essential provision, because that deals with the effects that may in cases that we're aware of have caused adverse effects for neighbors. K we could live with, or we could live without. That's more to protect those who live in residences.
Also, I do think that if someone wants to use their master bedroom as a grow room, they should have the right to do whatever they want and where in their house that they should. I think that H, referring to the kitchen, bathroom, or primary bedrooms, if someone wanted to put one of those prefabricated grow rooms in their kitchen, I think they should be.
Certainly, as to bedrooms, if council, you wish to make a motion and council wish to omit that from the list, that would be up to council. I think primary bedrooms is there primarily because that is one of those places where, with respect to which children might have access if there are plants growing there. I think that was the logic behind that. It wouldn't undo most of what the ordinance tries to do if you eliminated bedrooms.
Right. I think, yeah, just maybe a door lock to keep the kids out. I feel like the big problem was the outdoor grows. I think that this is kind of a bit rushed as far as that. I would, if council would be interested in it, maybe pushing it. I mean, we could definitely get this done before next summer.
I don't know. I think it's a bit late. I had drafted the majority of this using models from Greenwood Village and other places. At the same time, council was considering regulating retail marijuana, and then the course of action changed, and you referred that matter to the electorate, and then the electorate chose to ban retail marijuana establishments from Canyon City, and the whole matter kind of got put away. Had I been better at my job, I might have waived the remaining parts that didn't have to do with retail and try to get your attention in a better way 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Are you finished?
Yeah.
Councilman Ketchmer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I did not have the benefit of being at that committee meeting, and but there's some things that I agree with Councilman Shiraki on. I do feel that this is rushed. I do feel like the size limitation is too limiting. I don't know that I'm an advocate to push it indoors. You know, I think that the growing season is over at this point in time for the year. I think that we should probably back up and reconsider this a little bit closer, and get a resolution that everyone can be comfortable with.
Councilman Bates?
When we brought it up to city council, there was basically 5 of the 6 people that wanted it brought up to city council. There is a majority that would like to take a vote on this, up or down.
Okay. Councilman Weed, you had something?
Yeah, John, you were talking about the state amending the regulations regarding marijuana grows. And when are they doing that? Is that in progress now? Are we anticipating something in the near future?
There was a bill passed this year that calls for some more regulations. If you follow the legislation and the regulations, they tend to repeat each other. Whichever came first, it tends to be repeated in the legislation or the regulations. So I would not expect, having looked at several years worth of these things happening, that regulations are going to look a whole lot different than they look now, with the exception that there is a crackdown. Maybe that's not the best word. There are more limitations with respect to caregivers. There are more limitations with respect to physicians and their credentials and the quality of their examinations and decision making. It should be easier now to contest a doctor's recommendation that an excessive number of plants be grown, but it's still going to be difficult. But the legislation adopted this year, some of it doesn't take effect until 2017. I'm not quite sure why, other than I think it was to give the regulators time to make regulations that were consistent with the current statute. I think it's Senate Bill 14, which was introduced and adopted this year.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilwoman Frida?
Well, I think this is fine, just as we have it. We had a substantial discussion on this. It wasn't rushed. As far as the language around the kitchen, bathroom, primary bedrooms, I'd like to ensure that this continues to be a home and not turned into a grow house. So I think it's primarily, this is a place for people to live. And I think setting parameters around where you can grow and not grow just makes sense. It's going to keep it a livable home and not turn it into something where people are just growing pot. So I'm all for keeping the bedrooms, and the bathroom, kitchen as they should be.
I have a question, because I wasn't here either. I was out of town when you had the discussion, but is the intent of this ordinance to restrict medical marijuana growth only to residential districts and then only by these guidelines, or is it for all zoning areas? I mean, is this eliminating virtually?
The regulations would apply throughout the city. On recreational marijuana, basically this Constitution already creates the limits. You have to have a secure area, 4 walls, a roof, and a locked door. So the only sort of issue that is mostly fallen through the cracks is medical marijuana when the grows are done pursuant to doctor permission to grow in excess of 6 plants. Everything most of us heard both times we were considering constitutional amendments as the electors of the state of Colorado was 6 plants and related marijuana coming from those plants, or 1 ounce or 2 ounces, depending on which constitutional provision you looked at. But if there's a medical necessity for greater than 6 plants, then an exception is there in the Constitution, the regs, the legislation, and everything else. Dennis, in further response to your question, what the legislature came up with in terms of limitations on patient grows is 99 plants. Now, I don't know quite where that came from, but I imagine there was one terribly sick person, 1 or 2, not many, where you had a physician who appeared to have credentials and credibility suggesting this patient might actually need the marijuana produced by as many as 99 plants. I mean, none of this assures a result or anything else. It's the physician saying the patient might benefit. And that's kind of how the regulations have read. But in terms of reining in what patients might do, 99 is the number that the state came up with, but always, going back to 2000, when Amendment 20 was adopted, local regulations have been permitted as a way to further limit in manners more stringent than the state regulates.
I don't think I phrased my question properly. Is the purpose of this ordinance to restrict medical marijuana growth only to residential districts?
No, the restrictions apply throughout the city. So you could have you could have medical marijuana being grown in a warehouse.
Okay, all right.
And you've got a limitation as to number of plants if the patient or the caregiver is cultivating.
Okay, thank you.
If it's grown by somebody else, they're going to be licensed under the state process.
Okay.
In section C, this chapter shall apply to all property within the city.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council?
I would like to maybe I would like to make a motion to do another workshop where every council member is present and really talk this out. I feel like we're just assuming that every caregiver is a drug dealer. I think that there are caregivers that are genuinely taking care of maybe 5 to 10 patients because they grow really good stuff, let's be frank here, and that people that are sick and ill are unable to cultivate marijuana at their residence. So for the people, I understand that there should be some exceptions to people that are honestly caregiving. I completely agree, we need to crack down on grow ops that are supplying the so-called black market with marijuana, but I think that we could definitely do another workshop. There's plenty of questions, and one more workshop isn't going to hurt anyone. I'd like to make a motion for one more workshop, please.
John, is it appropriate for him to make that motion before we have public comments?
I think you ought to take public comment if there are people who signed up to comment, and then I think the motion would be to table for refer back to the committee. Is actually what it ought to be.
We'd have public comment before
Is
we
that
get a
okay?
second.
Is that okay with you, Councilman?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so hold that motion. Any comments from the audience? Yes, sir. State your name and address, please, for the record.
Austin Dunnerman, 2430 Greenway Circle. How's everybody doing tonight?
So far, so good.
All right. I believe that an ordinance needs to be done, but not this kind of ordinance. This ordinance takes growing marijuana out of the hands of people that can't afford to grow indoors. I've done my own research. We have a business right downtown, and all they do is deal with growing indoors. So I went there and asked them a bunch of questions about what it would take to grow one marijuana plant. And it would cost around $650 just for the equipment, the lights, the ballast, the plugs, the timers, things like that. $650 right there, right off the bat for one marijuana plant. That's just one. Now I've asked, they had a worker there that used to grow for one of the grow houses, one of the local ones. So I was asking him about the actual plant. And he told me at a bare minimum, to get even a halfway decent yield with a halfway decent potency level, you would need at least 3 square feet. 3 square feet to do this. So if you look at the math on the ordinance, we're only giving them enough room to grow 10, but saying that they can grow 12, but only giving them enough room to grow 10. And that goes for indoors and outdoors. Because you have to have circulation for these plants. They're indoors, they're under a hot light for anywhere from 16 to 24 hours in a time period. So they have to have circulation to keep them cool and keep them out of temperature. That's hence the 3 square feet. For better product and higher yields, of course, 4 square feet, 5 square feet, the bigger you go, the better product you get. Now, this ordinance I don't think is good right now because the word I see a lot is unlicensed. Unlicensed growers. Okay, well, let's license them. As a city, let's have a license. We'd license people to grow indoor or outdoors. And that way, look at the knowledge we would gain from that. Now we will know how many people are growing, who's growing medical, who's growing recreationally. Now we have a total of plants. All of this information for our police to know now. Sorry, I'm a little nervous here. Now, an idea on the process for like a licensing. The who, what, when, where, and how. Name, address, how many plants, and exact location of where the plants are going to be grown. That way, if anything is going wrong, the police know exactly where these plants should be. And if they're not, then appropriate action can be taken. And I'll get to those later. Now, to help pay for this, so instead of getting money on the back end on fines and everything, let's try to get money on the front door. So with these licenses, $25 per person, and these are just numbers. These can be taken any which way, $25 filing fee. And then for each plant, $10 registration fee. Think of the numbers. It's not a lot of money, but it is money. And I think right now we could use the money, no matter how small it is. Enforcement. What I noticed in this ordinance, and one of the biggest complaints I know is the smell of marijuana when it's growing and being cultivated. What happens is when they pull the plant out of the ground, enzymes are released throughout the plant. And when they start trimming it, that's where the smell comes from. It's kind of like a reaction from being harmed, like a self-defense mechanism. It just starts smelling, and it does get really bad. So I feel for the people living by those people with 80 plants growing. I couldn't imagine the smell. It's got to be horrible. But with the ordinance in J, it says it's just recommended to have a ventilation system. The ventilation system is what gets rid of the smell. So let's make it a law that if they're growing indoors, they have to have the ventilation system. That'll cut out the smell so that it saves the neighbors. As far as indoor grows, it's kind of hard. I mean, how are you going to enforce these indoor grows? You know, in the licensing process, they can be like, I'm going to grow indoors. This is the equipment I have. This is where it's going to be. And that's one way to do it. But we all know criminals don't follow laws. So if we put everybody indoors, the criminals are going to be like, oh, let's go indoors. And they're going to have one plug growing 100 plants. And then you're going to have water mixed in with all that electricity with no power plugs, no anything. So now we're creating a bigger fire risk by pushing everybody indoors. I think the 20-foot rule is a good idea for both outdoor and indoor grows. 20 feet from any residential area. I think that's plenty of room for the smell, hopefully, to go away. Here's some ideas to consider to help reduce those big grows. How about you can't grow within 1,000 feet of a school? You can't grow outdoors within 1,000 feet of school, excuse me. That way, now you think all the schools we have in Canyon City, now put 1,000 feet around them. That covers a lot of square area for people not to grow outdoors, and plus it keeps the smell from going across our kids. Now with the licensing, We can hold a standard to these people. Three-strike rule, if we get complaints from neighbors, our law enforcement goes over there, they look and they find if there's a default. If there's a deficiency, the person gets 30 days to fix the deficiency. After that, any deficiency, all the plants are pulled, $500 fine, and their license to grow is revoked for a year. Second offense, fines double, loss of plants, loss of your license for 3 years. A third offense, permanent loss of your license, fines doubled, and we can go on from there. Just some ideas to throw around. Instead of just making it completely illegal to grow outside and putting all that more burden on our police department and creating fire hazards by pushing people inside, because not everybody can afford to have an electrician come out or have a plumber come out. So they're growing outdoors because they enjoy marijuana or they use marijuana for medical purposes, and now you're trying to take that away from them. That's not the answer. We should try to regulate it in a way that we can gain knowledge from it so that we can actually get a number of the good people that are growing responsibly and legally, because they're out there. Because right now, all this represents are the negative. We need to find out the positive. And if we get people to register to grow, we can find out what that positive is and move from there.
Excuse me. Are you referring to recreational marijuana and just for personal use or for commercial use?
Just personal use,
Okay.
not commercial, no. This is just for the people of Canyon City.
Well, there's
For their own personal
already a
use.
standard out there for that anyway. There's already a standard out for that anyway. I mean, you can grow in your backyard, you can grow in your basement. State law says you can. So I don't know where we're infringing upon any of that, okay? What we're dealing with are the people that are taking advantage of the medical marijuana stigma, if you want to use, or a little red card that they consider a license,
Right.
et cetera. That's what we're dealing with right now, if I'm right, John. Okay, with,
Is it
I mean,
mainly
the
just
other
medical
one's
then?
done by, the other
Okay,
one's done by
then
state law.
apply it to the medical. That's too easy. I mean, just take the recreational out of it and put the medical. I mean, that's a
That's what
simple
we're-
fix.
I believe that there's a misunderstanding here. The grows that you're speaking of are all protected by state law. So again, to reiterate what he is talking about, we're talking about unlicensed grows outside of the scope of a normal caregiver. And that's really what this is what this is dealing with here.
Right, but it's pushing everybody indoors though, correct?
No, actually, that's not what it says. You can grow outside
If you're a patient.
if you're a patient. If you're a patient, you can grow outside. You can have 32 square feet outside.
Well, I guess the ordinance is a little confusing then, because I know that.
It's actually quite
recreational
clear
is
in,
brought into it too. Is mentioned a couple of times with the medical. But the point being though, we still only have one side of the story, folks. We have the negative side of it, correct? Of what's going on, what's wrong, the people complaining, correct? Which our police are involved with in some of them, correct?
We have a fire chief, a fire department that's complaining about it. We have a chief of police in the police department that is complaining about the excess, not the legal, not the ones that are trying to play by the rules, but the excess. 90 plants up against the fence of a neighbor's house. We got a neighbor complaining to us about the smell, as you mentioned. Would we fine them for the smell? I mean, it's
No, you can't
property-
find someone for a
But
smell.
but there's no license on that place next door.
Yeah.
You can find someone for a smell.
Oh, yes, you can.
Really?
Oh, yes, you can.
That's
Yeah, you can. That's in our other regulations.
really.
Mm-hmm.
So
Welfare.
smell can
Welfare.
get you fined.
Happiness.
A smell could lead to the filing of a nuisance citation, and the end result of the nuisance process could include both an order to do away with the plants or move them indoors, and a fine associated with growing plants that had a noxious odor. So yes, it could happen, and it happens every day.
Well,
Not necessarily with marijuana, but with other
Other
smells.
things.
but let me ask you one other thing. These people that are growing 80 plants outdoors, okay, we do this ordinance. They're smart enough to read the ordinance and say, okay, they're gonna bust us if we're growing outdoors. So what I'm saying is now you're pushing them indoors, and criminals are not gonna hold to any electrical, plumbing, or building guidelines. Basically, you're gonna have a great big fire trap.
They may not, but they can be dealt with if they don't.
Right, and that's after the fact of a house burning down or even the neighbors burning.
So what you're saying, if somebody has an illegal grow, we shouldn't do anything about it, we should turn our heads so they don't take them inside?
No, no, we should enforce some
You
regulation.
can't pick and choose, you can't cherry pick it. I mean,
And cherry pick, it's called
either they're
compromise.
licensed,
Compromise is cherry picking.
either they're licensed to grow medical marijuana under a red card, and they're licensed to grow X amount of plants for themselves, okay?
Right,
80 plants for themselves doesn't constitute pickers coming in and trimming off plants and
no, and
boxing it
I
up.
agree with you, 80 plants is.
Excuse me a minute.
crazy
Hold on a
amount.
second. Let's go back to the ordinance,
I'm done.
okay?
Let's go back to the
I'm
ordinance.
reading my summary sheet here, and it says requiring all marijuana grows to be in secure areas inside of primary residences, garages, or accessory structures.
He has,
That was the
That
memorandum
memo.
that went to the committee.
Right, that's the summary.
And that led to the enlargement of the definition of secure area
Okay.
to provide limited outdoor growing for patients.
Okay, I was just reading your summary and not the ordinance itself, but it just raised the concerns. Thank you. Do you have anything to add?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the audience? State your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Allison Helsley, and I live at 94 Eagle Drive South, Canyon City.
Headshot.
That?
What was your name again?
Allison Helsley. And I just was unclear on a couple things. The first thing I was unclear on was whether or not this applied to the whole city or specifically primary residences. I've heard two different answers, and I just
The
wanted to get
answer,
clarified.
with respect to the ordinance as it is currently drafted, is that it applies to the entire city.
And I would like to
Medical
suggest.
No, all prohibitions contained in the ordinance as drafted would apply throughout the city without regard to districts.
So the reason I'm here tonight is last year, I found out that my rental house had been converted into a grow house. I lived in Texas, and I got a phone call from my father who was doing the property management. And the pictures that I received basically looked like a different home. It looked like something out of Breaking Bad. There was tents. The house was basically destroyed. He called the police, and they couldn't come. They wouldn't come. I called the DEA. There was not much that could be done. I was pretty ticked, so I flew to the state capitol. And I was actually present when they were working on the caregiver bill in February. I went up there pretty angry. I was thinking mostly about how I had no way to mitigate myself, to protect my property. There was a lot of electrical work that was done that wasn't done correctly. I was told by the fire chief that if it had caught on fire, it would be burned down. They would let it burn down. I was told by my insurance agent that they would not cover it. So I sat there. By trade, I was a risk mitigator, compliance professional. And everybody in my group thought it was pretty hilarious that I had not mitigated the risk on my own home. So when I flew up there, I was planning to speak about these problems. And what ended up happening is I listened for 6 hours. I listened to patients. I listened to landlords, police. I listened and I heard a lot of stories that made me think that the current setup doesn't really work for anyone. And so I recently quit my job and I bought a building here in Canyon with the goal of helping each one of the members of these groups. I would like to get all of the grows that I can out of the neighborhoods to protect landlords like myself. I would also like to give patients access to see where their grows are being grown. Because right now, they have no idea where their grows are being grown or the conditions. If it's in a moldy electrical, fire hazardous place, the police have no idea who's legal and who's not. And the way that it's set up is that if they confiscate the plants of a caretaker and they find out in court that he was later legal, it's $5,000 per plant that they have to pay the caregiver. It's a lot of money. So a lot of times the police won't take the chance, which is why they didn't come to my house when I called. So what I would like to do is to propose that before you vote on this bill, that you come and you let me present to you my solution and give you a tour of my facility. I have a line of people that would like to rent space. It's based on their personal use space, based on their personal use plant count, and grow in a state-of-the-art facility designed for health and safety, total transparency, under the current personal use laws. I'd ask you to wait to vote. I hope I made sense. I'm not a very good public speaker.
And that property is in the city, correct?
Yes.
What is it zoned?
Currently zoned commercial. I bought it specifically because it used to be a cannabis cultivation site. So the city had previously voted that they were okay with growing marijuana on that site. It's away from schools. It's away from anybody that would typically want it out of their neighborhood.
Aren't you in the industrial zone then?
It's commercial, but it's next to the industrial zone, yes.
Councilman Ekstrom, you had a question.
This is a licensed grow that you are proposing?
Each person would get access to grow their own personal use grow in personally use space. So everyone would have to apply and show me how much they are able to personally grow. So if they do not have a medical card, they can only grow 6 plants. Now those 6 plants are not being grown in a neighborhood, in that bedroom, in whatever room it is in a house. If they have the license to grow more, if they've got a prescription, they could grow that here in my facility based on providing the appropriate documentation. I think it's important to recognize that in the state of Colorado, everyone has the ability to grow those 6. But those people that have the ability to grow more, the state recognized that there was medical needs out there. They have prescriptions, and if we provide no place for them to grow their prescriptions, they're going to ignore your ordinance. My solution, combined with yours, would provide a way to get it out of the city while still giving them the ability to grow their personal use.
And you'd be willing to come to a public works meeting and...
Absolutely. I've worked with very expensive lawyers for the last year. I would love to show you guys what I've done, what I've created, and the interest that I've basically created through talking about what each member in our community wants. And this is a way to reach our goal, each of our goals, outside of the community doors. It gets the grows outside of the neighborhoods, gets the police to know where the legal grows are, gets us the ability to know who's growing, and making sure that they're not growing more than what they're legally allowed to grow for their personal use.
I'd just like to applaud your entrepreneurialism.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for?
Well, not for Allison, but for John. I'm just curious. Earlier, the gentleman who spoke earlier had suggested that individual growers, whether it's recreational or medical, be licensed. Now, aside from the fact of whether that's practical or reasonable, is that something that the city would be allowed to do?
I'm not certain of that. There's very, very clear authorization for regulation through land use and zoning laws. There's no similar clear authorization for the city licensing in areas where the state also, where the state doesn't license. The state licenses all the medical marijuana centers and related businesses, and the state licenses all the recreational marijuana stores and associated businesses, including in both cases the grow areas. But there's no clear authorization in the constitutional amendments, the legislation, or the rules that would authorize a city to regulate with respect to what we have referred to as unlicensed growers. And those are patients, caregivers, and then persons who have a right to grow plants as 21-year-old adult types in the state of Colorado.
It's important to note that everyone has the right to grow their six. But if a doctor recommends up to 99, they can grow up to their 99 under their medical card. If they're a caregiver, they can grow for 5 patients currently. That law is changing, and there's going to be some things that will be coming out in 2017, but the spirit of it will still remain. So the thing I want to highlight with that is that if the caregiver himself has a prescription for 99, and they have 5 patients who also happen to have a prescription for 99, you could see how the potential to grow a lot of plants legally through the state of Colorado could happen. The local zoning can put in controls, as John is talking about here. And that's why what I'm suggesting is that we use zoning to help prevent it being in neighborhoods in excess, but we still provide a place for them to exercise their constitutional right and their prescriptions granted under the state of Colorado. We just choose the location.
I have some more comments, but I think they're more appropriate after we get done with public comment.
Okay. Councilman
Well,
Bates?
yeah, I do too. I assume you've had this checked out through the fire department and the code officer and all that other stuff?
I've been in contact with the local DEA, yes. This isn't something that falls under MEDIT's personal use laws. I've also contacted the local chief and various others in the community. I was planning on contacting additional people, everybody here, but I saw this on the agenda tonight, and I thought that I better come down because I did not want to be voted out of business right as I'm opening my doors. And like I said, I have a long list of people that have agreed not to grow in the neighborhoods if I open my doors.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Mr. Meisner, you have a comment? Okay, then, Councilman Wee, you had a question? You had some comments?
No, I think I'll just reserve them, and if Councilman Shraki is going to make his motion, I'll just
Still have a
save
motion on the
them.
table.
Okay, so were you going to make a comment before or after we field his motion? You're good?
Get
Okay.
it done.
And Councilman Shraki, your motion to table this for a period of time still
Yes.
on the floor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Meeting would be the 18th, if that's any,
Table it till the 8th.
That was my recommendation, that'd be a referral to committee on a date certain.
Specific-
if
specific
you're going to
date.
table it.
And we'll ensure everybody will be there, right?
Probably not.
Can't guarantee that.
it would be the Public Works is the November 18th, and then the next one would be December 9th, General Government.
Councilman, you want to state your motion so that we're clear?
Yeah, can we table ordinance number 13 of 2015 until the next city council meeting on November 18th?
You want to refer it to committee?
Refer
Public
it to
Works.
committee.
Refer it to Public Works Committee on the 18th? Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Okay. Have a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Councilman Ketchmar. We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah. Actually, it's Ms. Helsley. I'm really interested in what she had to say. even back in our first meeting, when we discussed this in committee, my comment had been that I really hate to see this pushed indoors, particularly in residential areas, and this may be a solution to that.
And we agreed on that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I'm willing to talk about it a little bit more. I think there's some merits.
Any other discussion? Look like you're going to say something, Councilman Ketchman? No. You're going to stay quiet. It's the day before election, I see.
Do we need a second?
I have
I got a second.
I haven't
Got a second from Ketchman.
Oh, okay, all right. That was so long ago.
Okay. Call the roll.
Councilmember Sharaki. Councilmember Ketchmar.
Aye.
Councilmember Bates.
No.
Councilmember Weed.
Aye.
Councilmember Frida.
No.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
No.
Fair.
You got it.
6 years I almost made it without having to break a tie.
You got it.
Mayor Guerra.
I don't see any harm in pushing this back to committee. If everybody feels the same way after a committee meeting, then we can always bring it back to vote. I agree with you, and you say that the outdoor growing season is past, so we really have till springtime. So I'm going to vote yes.
Approved by majority vote.
Oh, I also did want to talk about something. That sounds horrible. Is there any type of Huxley's comment about her rental property? Even if we do all this, we're still going to have criminals. And
I think it's something we need to look at.
We'll have to wait till committee.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's an isolated incident. From
Right.
what
Oh, I know it's
understand.
not.
Should have some kind of course of action.
If we could retool this ordinance to get a little bit better grip on that, and I think Ms. Helsley can probably help us based on her experience. I know that she's talked with some other people.
Bring all your thoughts to the committee meeting.
Next is citizens' request to speak to city council.
We have, computer not working. Just a minute. We have one written request to speak to council on an agenda item that's not on the agenda. It's from Tom Kilgore, 3160 East Ridge Lane. He wants to speak to council about the soapbox derby. Come on up, Tom.
Soapbox derby. Are you just going to get on a soapbox now?
Yes, yeah, we can all get on our soapbox. This is pretty neat. Don't tell my church members that I only have 5 minutes to speak, because they're going to want a discount on my salary. You have in front of you the paperwork about the soapbox derby. Basically, myself and the great Lisa over here, she's my partner in crime, and several city leaders that you see listed before you have come together. And what we're trying to do is bring together an event, the soapbox derby, so that parents, partners, whomever that care for children can come together and help them construct a soapbox derby race car and go through the entrepreneurship of developing sponsors and building their car and then racing that car. And we've spoken with the school superintendent and got access into the school system. We have tentatively scheduled a meeting with our police department later this week to discuss the use of Fields Avenue as the race site. And there's lots of coordination and lots of stuff to go. This is just mainly a preliminary discussion with you to let you know this is something that we're working on. And this lady next to me has opened my eyes to the genius of our city. This lady is brilliant, and I have learned as I've worked with you over the last few years and as president of our ministerial alliance how awesome our city is and how awesome the leaders that are in our city. And I think we can come together and do something really neat for our kids here in our town. So you have before you the information. We stand here to answer your questions.
You know, I think if we did that down Skyline Drive, it might become a NASA-sanctioned event.
That was my suggestion as well.
I had the same idea.
The
Floral
age group target
Avenue
is
might
7 to
work.
13, not people who think like
Want
a
our drivers to
13-year-old.
survive.
I think it sounds like a great idea.
If some of
personally.
the questions you may have, the soapbox derby requires, as part of your entrance fee, there's insurance that's paid for, so all of that's taken care of. And there will be coordination with the city about the use of the road and some, paperwork to be signed and approval required, and things like that that do need to be done. But I think it's a good idea, and I would ask for your support.
We're just really trying to get kids off of their computers and get them involved in family again and get them involved in business and get them to take part in something that really draws everything together and makes them part of an organized group as opposed to this all the time.
So I don't know, I mean, I'm certainly familiar with Soapbox Derby, but this is a nationally sanctioned kind of thing?
Yes, it
and
is.
winners can go on to compete
Right.
regionally
The winner
or
here would go to
statewide?
Dayton, Ohio.
Ooh.
And whoever wins at our race will go to the race in Dayton and represent our city.
Are there other soapbox derbies in Colorado?
Yes, there's
Oh,
one
yes.
in Pueblo, for instance. And hopefully what we're trying to get is, if this catches on here in the city, is Pueblo in here and maybe another city, maybe Colorado Springs, we can come together and have a regional race as well. So yes, to answer your question. And Pueblo actually is providing some starter cars for us to show around the neighborhoods so kids can see what the finished product looks like.
When was the last year we did that here? I know when John Nichols was here, we had done it before. Do you know?
No, but it's been a while, Kathy.
It's been a long while, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. That's really neat.
For me, thanks.
Thank you. Is that the only one?
That is it, Mr.
All right.
Mayor.
We're adjourned.